Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadachari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Shiny to the Vishnu Par Paramahansa Hari Vrajakacharya Stotra Tata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhai Charana Ravinda Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Save the Whole World Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Par Paramahansa Hari Vrajakacharya Astottara Satoshi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki, Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Zakho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gokavana Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki, Braj Bhumi Shivan Dama Dama Ki, Navadip Mayapur Dama Ki, Purushtam Chetra Jaganapuri Dama Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, all glories to somebody's, all glories to somebody's, all glories to somebody's, all glories, let us be Sri Guru and Sri Garanga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. What verse is on the board? Okay. King Kritang Manda Bhagyaya Na King Krita Manda Bhagyaya Na King Kritang Manda Bhagyaya Na King Vadishanti No Janaha King Vadishanti No Janaha King Vadishanti No Janaha King Kritang Mandibhagyayana King Vadishanti No Janaha Iti Vivalita Gehan Iti Vivalita Gehan Iti Vivalita Gehan Adaya Mushalang Yayu Adaya Mushalang Yayu Adaya Mushalang Yayu Iti Vivalita Gehan Adaya Mushalang Yayu King Kritang Mandabhagyayana King Vadishanti No Janaha Iti Vivalita Gehan Adaya Mushalang Yayu King Kritang Mandabhagyayana King Vadishanti No Janaha Iti Vivalita Gehan Adaya Mushalang Yayu. Kim, what kritam has been done, manda bhagyai, who are very unfortunate, na, by us, kim, what, vadishanti, will they say, na, to us, janaha, the family, iti, thus speaking, vivalitaha, overwhelmed, gehan, to their homes, adaya, taking, mushalam, the club, yayu, they went. Translation. The young men of the Yadu dynasty said, "Oh, what have we done? We are so unfortunate. What will our family members say to us?" Speaking thus and being very disturbed, they returned to their homes, taking their club with them. Responsively, please. The young men of the Yadu dynasty said, "Oh, what have we done? We are so unfortunate. What will our family members say to us?" Speaking thus and being very disturbed, they returned to their homes, taking the club with them. So there's no purport, and there's actually only very short purports through to the end, and there's one purport at the end. I'll read the next verse, but it's kind of interesting. It's like they heard the curse of the sages, and then they uncovered the belly of Samba, who was pretending to be a woman, and they saw this iron club, which was exactly what the sages have said. And they were kind of shocked to their senses by this whole occurrence, and they realized, my gosh, we've committed a great aparat here, and this will bring about the destruction of the dynasty. And naturally, they're very, very disturbed. But it's kind of interesting, you'll see here, Krishna doesn't get involved at all. Because Krishna knows what's going to happen. It's actually his plan. Tachchopaniya su sadasi parim lana mukhashriya ragya avedayam chakru sarvayadava sanidao. The Yadu boys, the luster of their faces completely faded, brought the club into the royal assembly, and in the presence of all the Yadavas, they told King Ugrasena what had happened. Short purport. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that the word Ragye refers to King Ugrasena and not to Krishna, well, not to Sri Krishna. Because of their shame and fear, the boys did not approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Shrudva mokham viprasapam drishta cha mushalang nipa vishmitta bayasantrasta babuvu dvarakaukasha. O King Parikshit, when the inhabitants of Dwarka heard of the infallible curse of the Brahmanas and saw the club, they were astonished and distraught with fear. Tachchuna yitva mushalam yaduragya raja sa ahuka samudra salile prasyal loham chasyava sheshitam. After having ground the club to bits, King Ahuka, Ugrasena of the Yadus, personally threw the pieces along with the remaining lump of iron into the water of the ocean. King Ugrasena thought Samba and the others should not feel any shame or fear, and thus, without even consulting Sri Krishna, he ordered the club ground to bits, and thrown into the water, along with the small iron lump remaining, which he considered insignificant. Which is a very significant purport and verse this, because we see that normally in all these situations they would naturally consult Krishna. What's the right thing to do? And we see that throughout the various pastimes that are being described in the 10th canto, how Ugrasena and all the Yadavas, whenever anything major was happening, they'd always go to Krishna. Yet in this instance, which was probably the most significant instance that's happened to the Yadu dynasty, they didn't consult him. So one might question, why is that? And as is often the case, it is described here in the Bhagavatam, we can understand it's due to the will of the Lord, because the Lord wanted this to happen. This is actually Krishna's arrangement. Because also, you see, like with personalities like Narad Muni and these other great, Kanva, Sita, Devla, who are all there, especially Narad Muni, he's not going to be whimsically cursing the family of Lord Krishna. He's not going to do that at a whim. And we also see that with Narad Muni, he's a great facilitator of the pastimes of Krishna. You'll see so many instances where he's just like we see with Kamsa, for instance. Kamsa, like when he heard that prophecy that the 8th son of his sister is going to kill him, then immediately he locked them up in jail, so that whatever. Well, not immediately. So first off, he let them go, but then after taking advice from his ministers, he decided to lock them up in jail, because that would be the safest thing, so he could easily get the children. And then what happened was when they were in jail, the first child was born, and he came there, and he was going to kill the child, but then he was informed. Vasudeva said, but it's only the 8th child you have to fear. You don't have to fear the first one. But then Narad Muni advised Kamsa. He came and advised Kamsa. He said, but it could be any of the children. Why are you believing a voice in the sky? It could be any child that's going to kill you. And so this pushed Kamsa to kill every single child. And Narad Muni's intention wasn't just to kill children. That's not what he was about. His intention was to accelerate, to bring the appearance of Krishna as quick as possible, to kill the demon, and so that Krishna would perform these wonderful pastimes. And if we look at this from an ordinary perspective of mundane morality, then it seems like Narad Muni is a very sinful person, because he's encouraging, in this case, he's essentially, bringing about the demise of the whole Yadu dynasty, or in the case of Vasudeva and Devaki, he's causing Kamsa to kill all their children. But and this is often the case. You'll also look in the Bhagavad Gita with Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna, in the first chapter, he says Adamavit Krishna Parushanti Kalastriyastriya Dushtash Vaishnav. What's the last line? Jayate Vanashankara. He said, I've heard by authority that when the leaders of the family are killed, then this leads to adharma, or Vanashankara. It's irreligious principles that will bring about unwanted progeny, etc., etc. But then what does Krishna say? Because he's quoting from authority. He's quoting from scriptural authority, so you think, well, actually, this is the right thing. But then Krishna, in the beginning, the first thing that Krishna says, basically in the Bhagavad Gita, he says to Arjuna, he says, while speaking learned words, so-called learned words, you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief, because a wise person laments neither for the living nor the dead. So Arjuna is quoting, again, he's quoting mundane morality, and Krishna is giving him transcendental knowledge. So we see the same point is being demonstrated here in this wonderful pastime, is that there are different perspectives here. that you can take the mundane perspective and think, oh, this is very sinful because they're going to kill the whole Yadu dynasty, which comprises of millions and millions of people. Or you can take the transcendental perspective and understand how Narad Muni is simply acting as an instrument to fulfill the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's making arrangements so that Krishna's pastimes, his final pastimes in this earthly realm, can be carried out. And so this is one of the services of Narad Muni. It's also interesting, is like he does these things, but there's no sense of loss or lamentation from his part. He's doing a service for Krishna. He's very happy to do that service, and it's not like he's kind of like a mean-spirited person who just likes to see others suffer. No, he's acting out to do his service. And the fact that none of the young children or the young boys, they consult with Krishna. Neither does King Ugrasena or anyone in the court consult with Krishna, which in and of itself is quite an extraordinary event, because Krishna is like, he's the center of their universe, not just the center of the dynasty, but he's the center of their universe. Everything they do is for Krishna. Their whole lives is dependent upon Krishna. And this momentous event happens where Narad Muni has pronounced a curse on the dynasty. They're all aware of who Narad Muni is. Even these young boys we see in verse 18, how they've realized, oh my gosh, we've really blown this. We've insulted these great personalities, and they've pronounced a curse on the dynasty, and they think, what have we done? Yet no one thinks to consult Krishna. And that sounds to me like, it's quite extraordinary. But we can understand this is Krishna's arrangement. This is Krishna's will that this happens. He doesn't want to interfere because he just wants the pastime or this sequence of events to be carried out, because it is his plan. Because he's at the Battle of Kurukshetra, he already annihilated the Kauravas and all the proud kings. Millions of, there's different figures, but someplace Prabhupada says 640 million, I think it was the figure. Sometimes they say 64, sometimes 6.4, but a lot of people were annihilated. All the proud Kshatriyas basically on the planet Earth were annihilated in that battle. And also great personalities like Bhishma, Dronacharya, etc. They were also wound up, their presence on the earth. And it was only the Pandavas and a few personalities that remained from that whole battle. Of all those 640 million people, there's only about a few dozen people remained at the end of it. And so Krishna had already removed all those personalities, but also it's described in the Bhagavatam how the Yadus, because of their power, because they were the only significant dynasty remaining on this planet, because they didn't partake in the Battle of Kurukshetra, but they would also become proud because of their power. And so Krishna, rather than leaving them here on the earthly planet, he arranged for them to also wind up their time on this planet. And this was what's enacted here. And we see what will happen in the subsequent chapters, because this is like the prelude to the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty. This is sort of setting the scene. And we see in subsequent chapters how they go to, I think it's Prabhaschetra, and they drink wine which is made from putrefied rice. They become intoxicated, and over trifling words, like such small insignificant words, they start to fight. And you would think that people like the Yadus, because they're coming from quite a cultured background, they're directly associated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they know he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not like they're an illusion about it. It's not like they're covered over. They know who it is that they're dealing with, Krishna and Balaram. They know that they're the Supreme Personalities of Godhead. And they fight. And then, as we'll see, we described in these verses here, they pick up these reeds, which has become like iron, and they're very, very sharp because these iron filings are in them. And they start to fight with one another. And then at some point, they turn it on Krishna and Balaram. They're so bewildered, not by the intoxication, It's not by intoxication. Because they're engaged in pastimes with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can understand it's Krishna's Yoga Maya potency. Because the Yoga Maya is the potency of Krishna that facilitates his pastimes. So they turn upon Krishna and Balaram. And when they turn upon Krishna and Balaram annihilate the whole dynasty in a very quick time. So it's really amazing how the Lord enacts his pastimes in the most wonderful way. And the other dynasty consisted of millions upon just his children alone. He had 16,108 wives, and by each of those wives he had 10 sons, not to mention how many daughters, and each of those sons had 10 sons. So you figure that out, like 16,108 wives, by all of them 160,000 sons, by them also 10 sons, there's 1.6 million sons. So it's like, almost 2 million just from his sons and grandsons, not to mention the daughters. So, and that was just his family, his immediate family, not to mention the whole dynasty. So you can understand, quite a large dynasty. And also, it's also very interesting here in this verse. I'll read the subsequent verses, or in the purport where the commentators are saying how there was a small lump of iron that remained, which he considered insignificant. He threw that into the ocean. Now, of course, we know if we follow the pastime through, that was a very significant piece of iron, because that's the piece of iron that grazed Krishna's foot, which was then the stimulus for him, or the prompting him to manifest his pastime of giving up his body. It was only just a little graze, like a scratch on his foot, but from that he manifested this pastime of giving up his body. I'll read the remaining verses. Kaschin matsyo krasiloham chunani kataralaistata uyamanani velayam lagnanya sankilairakaha. A certain fish swallowed the iron lump. It's interesting, it says a certain fish, a very particular fish. And the bits of iron carried it back to the shore by the waves, implanted themselves there, and grew into tall, sharp canes. And that's also very interesting. How is it that the iron didn't just fall to the bottom of the ocean and stay there? No, by Krishna's arrangement, or by his Leela Shakti's potency, these bits of iron were actually carried by the waves rather than falling to the... Because if you drop iron into the water, what's it going to do? It'll sink to the bottom. But by his Leela Shakti, these things were carried back to the shore, and they implanted themselves there and grew into tall, sharp canes. Matso grihito matchagnai jale nanyai sahanave tashodhara gatam loham sashalye lubdako karot. The fish was caught in the ocean along with other fish in a fisherman's net. The iron lump in the fish's stomach was taken by the hunter Jara, who fixed it as an arrowhead at the end of his shaft. It's all the pieces are starting to fall into place. Bhagavan gyata sarvata ishvaro pita ranyata kartum naichad viprasapam kalarupiyan vamodata. Knowing fully the significance of all these events, the Supreme Lord, although capable of reversing the Brahmana's curse, did not wish to do so. He did not intervene at all. He could have completely reversed the situation, but he did not intervene in any way. Rather, in his form as time, he gladly sanctioned the events, because this was bringing about his concluding pastimes in the Yadu dynasty. Purport. Ordinary persons may be surprised or bewildered that the Lord gladly sanctioned the cursing and destruction of his own dynasty. The word anvamodata used here indicates taking pleasure in something or giving sanction or approval. It is also mentioned kala rupi. Krishna gladly gave his sanction to the Brahmana's curse in the form of time. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada has commented that the Supreme Lord Krishna Chandra decided to maintain the curse intact in order to protect the actual principles of religion and destroy the unbecoming offense of the deceitful members of the Karshna dynasty. So we see how Krishna's, because he doesn't want to interfere with the curse pronounced by his devotees, because obviously they've pronounced this curse for a particular reason, because they saw these boys have become very, very proud. They've given up the principles of religion by trying to be deceitful to saintly persons. So there's many interesting lessons to be learnt from this pastime. It is clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita that the whole purpose of the Lord's descent into the material world is to re-establish the authentic principles of religion, in this verse, Puratanaya Salanam Vinaschaya Cha Duskritam, by which the conditioned souls who are suffering intensely under the laws of material nature can regain their original existential status as eternally liberated servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The living entity comes to this material world with a desire to lord it over material nature, although the living entity is in fact not a lord but an eternal servant. Due to this perverted tendency to exploit the entire world for his sense gratification, the living entity is prone to try to pervert the principles of spiritual life so that the eternal religious principles become appropriate to his own material sense gratification. Religion, however, is meant for pleasing the Supreme Lord by obeying his laws, and therefore Lord Krishna personally comes from time to time to revive and enliven the correct method of devotional service to his lotus feet. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clearly stated that Lord Krishna has completed the vast majority of his pastimes on the earth and was now making the final arrangements for his departure. Therefore, he wished to leave behind a vivid lesson for the living entities of this age, that the so-called religious person, even if he is so exalted as to take birth in the Lord's personal family, cannot violate the respect and reverence which is due to pure devotees of the Lord, such as Narad Muni. The principle of serving the pure devotee of Krishna is so essential for spiritual advancement that the Lord exhibited the inconceivable pastime of causing the destruction of his entire dynasty just to impress this point upon the conditioned souls of Kali Yuga. Srimad Bhagavatam hints at the great misfortune that would come after the disappearance of the Supreme Person of Godhead. Such misfortunes also occurred after the disappearance of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was accepted by Gaudiya Vaishnavas as Krishna himself. Through various instructions, the Bhagavatam provides for eliminating the cheating pseudo-religion that comes forth in human society after the departure of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya, exhibiting his magnanimous pastimes, drove away from South India all the false doctrines of the upper sampradayas, or so-called disciplic traditions of pseudo-devotees, who had gained great influence by resorting to the atheistic theories of the Buddhists and Jains. Thus he turned all of India toward the devotional service of Lord Krishna, so that due to the extensive preaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, there remained no topic of discussion in the world other than devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Tridandipad Prabodhananda Saraswati has elaborated on this in his verse Sri Putradi Katam Jahu Vishayina. Sri Narahari Sakar Thakur, in his book Krishna Bhajamrita, has corrected the improper statements of the Gauranga Nagari Vadis, Saki Beki Vadis, and others of the 11 pseudo-disciplic chains that claim to follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These unauthorized persons present cheating in the guise of religion and advertise their duplicity as kata, or pure worship of the Lord. Just as Krishna brought about a furious quarrel to destroy his own family, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arranged for the world to be flooded by varieties of Mayavad and Kamavad philosophies just after his disappearance. He did this to destroy persons who belonged to the 11 upper sampradayas, or unauthorized disciplic traditions, as well as the many other upper sampradayas that would appear in the future and presume to call themselves devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or pretend to be descendants in his family line. At the same time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arranged for his own men to be kept away from the pseudo-devotion of these cheaters. The devotees of Lord Gaurasundara, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, can discern the mysteries of his pastimes that manifest in the pastimes of Lord Krishna. The activities of the transcendental body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be understood in any ordinary mundane way. This is the essential meaning of this chapter. And as I was saying, we see how if someone tries to understand this from a mundane perspective, they just become bewildered because they don't have access to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's only a devotee who can actually understand what's happening here. And therefore, we see that the commentaries of the Acharyas are very essential in order to understand what's actually happening in these pastimes. Otherwise, because of our conditioned state, we will tend to interpret these from the perspective of mundane morality, and therefore will misunderstand. And this is, it's interesting, in the commentary there they talk about the different upper sampradayas, and essentially that's what's happened with them is because they try to interpret the transcendental activities of the Lord using their mundane intelligence. They completely misunderstand the Lord's pastimes. They completely misunderstand the process of devotional service, and therefore they concoct a process of bhakti that's based on their sense gratification. And so we see, especially in West Bengal and that district there, you'll see these different sampradayas are quite prevalent. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he preached vigorously against these upper sampradayas, and he largely defeated them. But still, you find, the Garanganagaris, the Saki Bekis, Nityananda Vangsa, these different groups are still quite prominent in India. They've sort of had a bit of a resurgence. Nityananda Vangsa, you'll find them quite prevalent in certain parts of Vrindavan. Also in a place called Ekachakra, yes, they're there, but also a place called Bankur, I think it is. They're also quite prevalent there. And Saki Bekis, you see them all over India. And then you have these, I forgot what they call them, but they're supposedly followers of Hari Hara. They come out every few years in India. They dress themselves in black. They wear these chadars with black with a grey edging on them, and they're kind of worshipping this. I've forgotten the name of the person, but he's supposed to be the son of half Vishnu, half Shiva form of the Lord, I guess. They're the person they worship. But they're just completely concocted. They have no real religious tradition, sort of scriptures, tradition, whatever. And so you see here that Krishna, by this pastime, he's also demonstrating that only through the greatly advanced devotees, like Narad Muni, pure unalloyed devotee of the Lord, can one actually understand. And this is the point that's given in the Mahabharata also. There's this Mahajanayena Katha Sapanta, that only through these great personalities can we actually understand the religious process. And therefore, it's key to the process of bhakti to take guidance, take shelter of a liberated person. And we're very fortunate in the Krishna consciousness movement, is we have Srila Prabhupada, who's the guiding light for our movement, and also he's left many amazing literatures for us to study and to understand this process of bhakti. Because without that, we'd be no different from any other religious organization. We'd be no different from any other person struggling in the material world trying to understand. We'd speculate, the actual conclusion. So, on our own, and it says, Matina Krishna Paratosa told me to been told me that Grihavartana, Dantago Vishtam Visham, Puna Punas Chavita Chavanadam. Because the living entity is struggling to, or is just striving to enjoy themselves in the material world, engaged in sense gratification, they cannot understand Krishna, not by their own endeavor, by the endeavor of others, or by a combination of both. They cannot understand. It's only when we receive the instructions of a liberated person, when we receive guidance from a liberated person, can we actually come to the point of understanding Krishna. So this is one of the important points that's being brought out in this amazing pastime. Okay, any questions at all? Hare
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhuji, we also see in the Mahabharata, Draupadi also cursed the Yadu dynasty.
Sorry?
Draupadi also cursed the Yadu dynasty. Gandhari, sorry. Dhritarashtra's wife. She also cursed the Yadu dynasty after the finishing of battlefield of Kurukshetra. When all the Gandhari's sons were died in the battlefield, so she got angry and she also cursed that how my sons have died. Similarly, your as a Yadu will also die. Is that also true?
So what's the question?
She cursed the Krishna that your sons will also die in the.
Yeah.
Is that also true, MC?
So that's also part of Krishna's Yogamaya, acting. Yeah. Because like, how can anyone curse God? And how can, if they do curse God, how will that curse have any effect? But due to his wanting to carry out particular pastimes, he agrees to accept these curses. It's just like, I think it was, there was some curse pronounced on Garuda, was it? Was it, I think, Sabari Muni? That one of his wings would fall off or something like that, and he just agreed to accept that curse, even though he's such a great Vaishnava, because he was eating fish or something, and therefore he was cursed. So sometimes it seems like people are able to curse God Himself or great personalities, and those curses take effect. And what you'll see happen is an ordinary person will say, like someone who's an atheist will say, he can't be God, otherwise how can he be cursed? So this is also part of Krishna's deluding potency. It's just like we see, as we'll see here, how Krishna is so-called killed by the arrow of Jara. And so then people are going to say, it's just, how can he be God? He was killed. God can't be killed. So Krishna's deluding potency, Yogamaya, then manifests as Mahamaya, so it bewilders these people into thinking that God's an ordinary person. Because they're not devotees, they're atheists. Their only business is to try to destroy God, not to understand God. Therefore, Krishna is what he says, from me come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So he's making the arrangements so that they can become more convinced in their atheistic position, because they're not interested in understanding God. They're not interested in understanding who they are. They just want to prove that that God does exist, or essentially they're demons. They want to kill God, just like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, and all these personalities. Their business is to kill God, so they kill God in their consciousness. He allows them to do that. So you'll see there's many pastimes that take place, especially in this section of the Bhagavatam, where it just seems like, to the mundane mind, how Krishna is just an ordinary personality. It's his arrangement to bewilder the atheists, because he doesn't want the atheists, to come to him, because they're not interested in that. They'll only approach Krishna in order to get some material benefit. They won't approach Krishna to achieve love of Godhead or to serve him. And we see that's also being pointed out in this purport, the difference between a devotee, their interest is to serve Krishna, and the non-devotees, their interest is to enjoy Krishna, or to enjoy his facility. So, yeah. Thank you. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice class. My question is, how do we distinguish between, I think Murli Manohar Prabhu also touched upon it, like our mistakes or foolishness versus Krishna's desire or will? Because I feel that when we are in the moment, it's very hard to even understand anything. It's easier in one sense to understand scripture because the acharyas have pointed to what is Krishna's will. The acharyas have pointed to what is Krishna's will, when his Yogamaya potency is acting. But in our day-to-day activities, I feel like it's very hard to understand, like, the distinction between Krishna's will and our own mistakes.
Yeah. Especially when we're influenced by the modes of nature, goodness, passion, ignorance, it can cloud our perception, or does cloud our perception. And the only real sort of way to essentially what we need to do is a process of purification. In the beginning stages of bhakti, it's very difficult because our consciousness is clouded by the modes of nature, material desires, lust, anger, greed, all this sort of stuff. But when we become more purified, it's just like, if you have a mirror, it's covered by dust, like a lot of dust. You look at it, there's no reflection. But then you start, in the case of devotees, it's covered by tilak spots, and it gets to the point where you can't see anything in the mirror, so you have to clean it for it to function. And the more you clean it, the more your reflection becomes clear. Just like yesterday, I went for an eye test, and so they were doing all these different lenses on the eye test. And one of the lenses, the letters were completely blurred. I couldn't even figure out they were letters. They were so blurred. And then as they tried all the different lenses, then it became more clear. And this is like the process of bhakti. It's like refocusing our vision. And we get to the point where the material desires are gone completely, material influence is completely gone. Then it's like having the perfect lens in front of us. Everything becomes completely sharp. And so you can understand. So from the conditioned perspective, it's very difficult to understand. Therefore, we need the guidance of the acharyas. We need the guidance of greatly advanced devotees. And the same point is, it says, Tako pratishta shrutaya vibhina, nasho rishi yashabhatam, dharmasya tatvam nihitam guhyam mahajaniya yanikatasapanta. So, Tako, by logic, you can't understand the scriptures. Taka pratishta, you can't establish the conclusion from logic. Shrutya vibhina, because the Vedas have got many divisions. And we see even Vedic scholars, they study the Vedas for their whole life, and they come to the wrong conclusion because they haven't taken shelter of a devotee of Krishna. And Prabhupada, there's a really interesting conversation where Prabhupada's talking about this gentleman called D.L. Roy, who was a famous personality in Indian history. And he wrote a book called Shah Jahan. And his friend, he gave his friend the book to read, and he said, I can't understand why you call this book Shah Jahan, because Shah Jahan's son was Aurangzeb. And he said, it seems to me like this book is all about the suffering, the miscreant activities of Aurangzeb. He killed his brother, he imprisoned his father, and his father was, because Mumtaz, his wife, had died and things like that, and so he was lamenting. And then so D.L. Rai, he makes the point to his friend that actually no, it's about Shah Jahan. It's called Shah Jahan because his book is all about the sufferings of Shah Jahan and how he suffered when his wife died, his son was killed and he was imprisoned. And so Prabhupada draws the point is actually the intention of the book is only understood by the author or someone who's a confidant of the author. So in the same way, and Prabhupada uses it to establish this point, that you can only understand the process of devotional service through Krishna or through his pure devotee. And this is the case of the Bhagavad Gita, for instance. Krishna explains the science of Godhead, or the science of God, to Arjuna. So, the Bhagavad Gita is giving you a very clear definition of the science of God. So through that, we can understand the science of God. And also, for those who are following the path of Arjuna, we can also understand the science of God. So, on our own, it's very difficult to understand, especially from the conditioned perspective. Therefore, it's very important for us to understand the Bhagavatam. And, and sometimes we have to make decisions on things, we're not clear on which way to go. So we consult with devotees, we consult with advanced devotees. But one of the things that you see happen from time to time is people, or devotees, they'll go around, they'll consult until they hear the thing they want to hear. It's like children, they'll go to the mother says no, they go to the father says yes. Well, Daddy said I could do it. So don't be like that. If you get 5 devotees are telling you, no, don't do this, then follow. And especially if they're senior devotees, they're purified in their hearts. Then, Okay. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samavekta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.